Hi, everyone who's listening to me. My name is Brian, I'm 36, and today I want to share a story that turned my life upside down. To be honest, I hesitated for a long time before talking about this. It's just too personal, too painful. But maybe my experience will help someone avoid making the same mistakes, or at least give them food for thought, I don't know. Let's start with the fact that I work as a programmer at a major IT company. My job, let's just say, is no walk in the park. Sit in front of the computer all day long, writing code, solving puzzles. The pay is decent though, I can't complain. But sometimes I really want to crawl out from behind the monitor, breathe some fresh air, socialize with real people. But no way. Deadlines, work, all that stuff. At home, my wife Emily was always waiting for me. We've been together since college. It's been 10 years of marriage. At first, everything was great. Love and doves, flowers and candy. But over time, the daily grind kind of got to us, you know. We started arguing more often over trifles, getting annoyed with each other. His socks are lying around. Her toothpaste is squeezed from the wrong end. You know how it goes. But there was an outlet in my life. A light at the end of the tunnel, you could say. And that light was called Olivia, my mother-in-law. I never thought I'd speak so highly of my wife's mother. Damn those stereotypes. But the fact is, Olivia and I always had a great relationship. She's a striking woman for us, statuesque, vibrant, with a mane of fiery red hair and big green eyes. She's sort of reminiscent of Meryl Streep in her prime, in an elusive way. And her personality matches her looks. Cheerful, always up for anything. There was always something to chat about with her, something to laugh about. Of course, I noticed her beauty. It was hard not to notice, you know. But somehow, I got used to perceiving Olivia solely as my mother-in-law. At most, as a good friend, someone it's nice to chat with over a glass of wine. And I didn't even entertain the thought of anything more. What do you take me for, really? Although, if I'm being completely honest, sometimes I did have that fantasy pop up, a fleeting, shameful one. It would flash through my mind and then immediately disappear, like how great it would be if Olivia was my age. A woman I could start a romance with, have a passionate affair with. But I quickly dismissed those thoughts, as if I had a young, beautiful wife, and here I was daydreaming about older women. I definitely needed to spend less time in front of the computer and get more rest. Otherwise, my imagination would really start running wild. Freud would be envious. So that's how I lived. Work home, occasionally family celebrations and outings with friends. I saw Olivia regularly, but more like in passing. She'd drop by with gifts for Christmas or for Emily's birthday. We'd smile, joke, ask each other about our lives, and then we'd scatter to our little holes. Just the usual everyday routine, nothing special. Until one fine day when the thunder struck. Or rather, not thunder, but Emily and I had a major argument, with yelling, slamming doors, and smashing dishes. So much so that the neighbors almost called the cops. And it all started over some silly thing. Emily asked me to go to the store for groceries, and I got caught up at work, got swamped and forgot. Well, it happens to everyone, right? But no, my wife threw a real fit, like I don't value her, I don't respect her, I don't give a damn about her, that I'm a soulless jerk who couldn't care less about the family, and all that kind of stuff. Of course, I didn't back down either. I started yelling that she never gives me a moment's peace with her nitpicking, that unlike some people, I actually earn money, instead of just wearing out the couch with my butt. Basically, we had a real shouting match. A true family idyll, damn it all. In the end, I slammed the door and left the house. I just couldn't take the screaming and accusations anymore. I wandered the streets, cussing under my breath, and my feet somehow brought me to Olivia's. My mother-in-law met me at the door of her apartment. She raised her eyebrows, giving me a once-over from head to toe. "Brian, what happened? You look terrible!" I just waved my hand and went into the living room. I collapsed onto the couch, cradling my head in my hands. It seemed like the words got stuck in my throat. And what could I say? That I got into a stupid argument with her daughter? That I ran away from home, unable to resolve conflicts like a grown man? But Olivia didn't press me. She went silently into the kitchen, rattling dishes, and a couple of minutes later she returned with 2 mugs of fragrant coffee and a plate of cookies. She sat down next to me, looking into my eyes with concern. "Come on, Brian, spill it. What happened between you and Emily?" And I gave in. I suddenly unloaded everything on her, as if at confession. about our constant bickering, about today's argument, about how sick and tired I was of being the scapegoat and punching bag. And Olivia listened without interrupting. She just nodded occasionally and frowned. When I ran out of steam, my mother-in-law just sighed and shook her head. "Oh dear, my darling, I had no idea things were so serious between you two, my poor boy." And she put her arm around my shoulders, and I, like the last fool, buried my face in her neck and burst into tears, like a child with whimpering and snot and all. I didn't expect that from myself at all, but I guess it had all built up inside me. The dam just burst. Olivia stroked my back, whispering something soothing. I clung to her like a drowning man to a straw. I absorbed her warmth, her care. God, how I had missed that. How long had it been since I felt so protected, I guess, understood and accepted? I don't know how long we sat like that. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe an eternity. But at some point, I suddenly realized that I wasn't crying anymore. I was just sitting there, my face buried in Olivia's shoulder, breathing in her scent. A subtle, sweet aroma of perfume and something else. An elusive yet familiar smell. That sobered me up like a slap in the face. I abruptly pulled away, wiping my wet face with my sleeve. I mumbled some incoherent apologies like, "I just lost it for a moment, I'm sorry. It's not very manly to blubber like that in front of you." But Olivia just smiled and stroked my cheek. So tenderly, almost intimately. I felt my breath catch at that sudden caress. "It's okay, Brian. It's good to cry sometimes, to let your emotions out. We're all only human, even you men." From her touch, from her low, velvety voice, shivers ran down my spine. I suddenly caught myself staring openly at Olivia, at her chiseled profile, at the dimple in her cheek, at her plump, slightly swollen lips. Hell, what was I thinking at all? This was my wife's mother, after all. Something must have shown on my face. Because Olivia suddenly looked embarrassed and averted her gaze. She got up hurriedly, smoothing her skirt. She cleared her throat and said with forced cheerfulness, "Okay, we've chatted enough for one day. Let me go reheat dinner. You must be hungry. You can spend the night here, and tomorrow with a clear head you can figure out what to do about Emily." I nodded gratefully, unable to utter a word. My throat felt like it was choked with everything. The tears, the revelations, the strange longing inside. I silently trudged to the guest bedroom, collapsed onto the bed without even undressing. Sleep overcame me almost instantly. My last coherent thought was, I have to call my wife tomorrow. Apologize, try to talk things through. You can't run from your problems forever, but I didn't know that this was only the beginning. The first pebble that started an avalanche, and that very soon life, would go straight to hell. The next couple of weeks, I was just drifting with the current. I went back home, made up with Emily. I even took her to the movies and a restaurant as a gesture of reconciliation. My wife seemed to thaw, became softer, more attentive, but something inside snapped, cracked. After that, our first time, I wondered, am I happy in marriage? Or am I just trapped in a habit, afraid to change anything? At work, everything was also going haywire. I couldn't concentrate, kept messing up with their code. I'd zone out, remembering those tear-filled eyes and tender embraces. Thoughts away, getting angry at myself. What nonsense is this, really? Have I gone senile in my old age? But the more I tried not to think about Olivia, the more often she appeared in my dreams. Lord, what dreams those were. Hot, shameless, deliriously realistic. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, gasping with arousal, and turn sleeplessly until dawn, afraid of waking my wife. In the day, everything was slipping. I forgot to eat, stared into space for hours. Emily frowned, asking if I was okay. Maybe I was coming down with something. I brushed her off, mumbling something about fatigue and stress at work. I lied straight to her face, just so I wouldn't have to admit the real reason for my condition. And I understood that vile, that it was unacceptable, shameful to pine after my own mother-in-law like this. It was neither humane nor familial, while Olivia herself would laugh in the room if she knew about my What a riot. Her
Your son-in-law has a crush like some snotty kid, but the heart cannot be commanded, and reason, alas, neither. I tried in vain to push this impossible, wrong situation as far away as
To throw it out of my head, to cross it out, to forget it. But no way. The more I tried, the deeper I sank. And it's not like I was burning with desire, craving her madly. No, it was more like something achingly tender, almost reverent. When you're almost afraid to touch her, and at the same time you understand, this is it. This is yours. Something familiar, real, until your last breath. It got to the point where I started looking for excuses to see Olivia. I'd drop by under the pretext of returning a book she'd wanted to read for a while. Or I'd invite her to a cafe, supposedly to consult her about an anniversary gift for Emily. And I'd just sit there, not taking my eyes off her, hanging on her every word, admiring her surreptitiously, and hating myself for this weakness. Olivia was quite a piece of work herself. She'd smile enigmatically, give me sidelong glances. She'd casually touch my hand when reaching for the salt shaker. From those touches, it felt like I was being zapped by lightning. I could barely restrain myself from grabbing her, from crushing my lips against hers. To hell with the people around us. But we held back. We teetered on the edge, played with fire. But we didn't cross that final line. Not yet, at least. And then Emily went away for a week to visit a friend in another city. They had studied together once upon a time, were inseparable. So they decided to get together, have a girls' night out, a relaxed atmosphere, cocktails, heart-to-heart talks, the whole shebang. I didn't object. I was even glad. I was tired of this unspoken tension, of the constant strain at home. Maybe she really did need to get away, to switch gears. Our relationship would only benefit from it, you know? The first day alone, great. I sprawled out on the couch with a beer, turned on some mindless action flick. I savored the silence and peace, with no one grumbling or nagging me. But by the evening of the second day, I started feeling kind of bored. Suddenly it felt too lonely in the empty apartment, like I wanted to climb the walls from this inexplicable gloom. Well, I snapped. I called Olivia, suggested we get together for a beer or two. There was such silence on the other end of the line that I almost regretted my impulse. But then my mother-in-law exhaled softly. "Come over, I'll be glad to see you." I rushed over like hellhounds were nipping at my heels. I got nervous right at the door. My palms started sweating. What was I doing, really? Just going to sit, chat, nothing special, just a family get-together. Olivia opened almost immediately. She smiled mischievously, her eyes sparkling. She was wearing a silky robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. I gaped at such beauty. I almost dropped the bag of beer. What a klutz. Well, we sat down anyway. As usual, chatting, laughing, reminiscing, only the atmosphere was completely different. Tense somehow, electrified, as if there was pure electricity between us, not air. And the further it went, the worse it got. All sorts of ambiguous jokes started coming up, inadvertent glances. Olivia kept inching closer on the couch, brushing my leg with her knee. I was going out of my mind, about to climb the walls with desire. And then we got to the point where we really opened up. About married life, about longing and dissatisfaction. Olivia sighed, saying she couldn't even remember when a real adult man had last held her in his arms, not some fool or pervert. Well, I blurted it out without thinking. I just blurted it out on the spur of the moment, like the last idiot. "I'd carry you in my arms, Olive, every day, every minute, and I'd hug you and kiss you and... oh, damn, what am I even saying?" And I turned beet red like a naughty kid. I wanted to sink through the floor from shame and embarrassment. That's it, I thought. We're done for. Now Olivia will tell me to get lost, and rightly so. I've completely lost my mind, idiot that I am. But she suddenly smiled. So softly, so warmly. She stroked my cheek, looked me straight in the eyes, so tenderly. "Thank you, Brian," she whispered with her lips. "You can't even imagine how much that means to me. It's been so long since anyone said such words to me." And at that moment, my heart skipped a beat and dropped, because I suddenly realized with piercing clarity, this is it. The moment when you can either back off and pretend nothing happened, or step off the cliff, into the unknown, into the abyss, and come what may. I don't know what came over me. It was like an eclipse, a bout of insanity. My heart was pounding like crazy. There was a roaring in my ears, and everything around me seemed to swim, to blur into a rosy haze. I leaned forward, staring unblinkingly into Olivia's eyes. She froze, parting her lips. Her breathing was ragged, quick and shallow. Her chest heaved heavily under the thin fabric of her robe. "To hell with it all!" I rasped, struggling to move my suddenly hoarse tongue. "I can't pretend anymore. I need you, Olive. I really need you." And I kissed her. I covered her soft crimson lips with mine. Olivia gasped, went limp in my arms. Then she wound her arms around my neck, pressed her whole body against me. She moaned into the kiss, softly, invitingly. After that, everything happened as if in a fog. Frantic caresses, ragged sighs, feverish whispers. I think we knocked over a couple of knickknacks, but it no longer mattered. The whole world shrank down to the heat of longed-for lips and the tremor of bare skin. We did it with abandon, holding nothing back, as if we wanted to absorb this moment forever, to commit it to memory. Impassioned confessions torn from delirious lips, names uttered by swollen, bitten lips, an insane, maddening thirst to possess. And then we collapsed onto the rumpled bed, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. Olivia hid her face against my chest, breathing quickly and raggedly. I stroked her tangled hair and stared blankly at the ceiling. My head was empty, ringing. What have we done, Lord? How are we going to live with this now? With the guilt, with the burden of betrayal? I cheated on my wife, the closest person to me. And with whom? With her mother. I'm disgusted with myself now. What kind of husband? What kind of man am I after this? As if sensing my thoughts, Olivia stirred. She raised her tired, dimmed eyes to me, smiled sadly at the corners of her mouth. "So that's it then. We got what we wanted, and what now?" I swallowed hard. My tongue felt thick and heavy, as if a lump was stuck in my throat. "I don't know, Olive, really, I don't know. We shouldn't have. It's wrong, it's vile. God, Emily will kill me if she finds out." My mother-in-law flinched, pulled away. She sat up on the bed, clutching the robe tightly across her chest. She hid her face in her hands, suddenly hunching, shrinking in on herself. "Emily must never know," she said hoarsely through her fingers. "You hear me, Brian? Under no circumstances. It would simply kill her, destroy everything, her trust, our family. We have no right to do that to her." I nodded mechanically, like a puppet. She was right. What was I thinking? Of course Emily shouldn't find out. We're adults. We'll figure this out ourselves. We'll swallow our sin, bury this shameful secret. But my wife doesn't need to suffer, to get dragged into our mess. After all, everyone has their own skeletons in the closet. "I promise, Olive," I rasped hoarsely. "I swear she'll never know. We'll act as usual. We won't give anything away. We'll cope somehow for Emily's sake." My mother-in-law squeezed my hand gratefully, nodded. For a second she pressed her forehead to my shoulder, as if seeking support. Then she got up resolutely, wrapping the robe around herself like armor. "You'd better go, Brian, before we end up doing something really stupid. Go home, sober up. And tomorrow we'll start a new life, as if nothing ever happened." I slowly slid off the bed, started gathering my scattered clothes. Olivia stared silently out the window, her back to me, tense, motionless. I ached to go to her, to embrace her, to tell her that everything would be all right, that we would get through this. But I only said a curt goodbye and left, quietly closing the door behind me. I knew that if I stayed now, I wouldn't be able to resist a second time. I would spit on everything and plunge into the abyss, and that would mean betraying Emily, trampling on our marriage, putting a fat cross over it. I made my way home on autopilot, my head spun with a carousel of images and thoughts. Flushed Olivia, clenched sheets, the frantic pounding of my heart, and that aching, bitter thought, "Dear God, what do I do now? How do I live with this burden, with this festering wound in my chest?" Already lying in bed, alone in the empty apartment, I closed my eyes and slowly exhaled. "It's okay, Brian. You'll cope. You have to. After all, you have no choice. For Emily's sake, for the sake of your family, you have to bury this secret. Forget, erase, cross it out. But that's easier said than done. You can't just command your heart to forget, especially when you feel like you're being turned inside out by this mixture of guilt, shame, and that aching, hopeless tenderness. They make it seem so easy in books. You had a fling, you dusted yourself off and moved on. But in real life, alas, everything is so much more complicated, more convoluted, more ambiguous. But I had made my choice, and now I had to deal with the consequences, to live with this somehow, to rebuild my relationship with my wife. And Olivia, well, to her I would forever remain a son-in-law, a close person, but nothing more. And what had been between us, just a fleeting eclipse, a bout of madness, a flare of lust. It happens. Who doesn't lose their head in spring sometimes? But why does it feel so bitter and like I want to howl? Why does it feel like I've just buried my own heart with my own hands? I pulled the pillow over my head and groaned dully. Here are your adventures, Brian. Here's your forbidden fruit, damn it. And what do I do with all this now? Hell, does this mean I'll have to suffer like this until the end of my days? All I could do was hope that time would put everything in its place, that it would dull the pain, smooth out the sharpness of memories. Otherwise, I might as well sign up for the monastery, really. With such a burden on my soul, all I could think about was salvation. The following days turned into an endless hell for me. I was torn between guilt, shame, and that painful longing for Olivia. I couldn't find peace. I couldn't concentrate on anything. The only thought pounding in my temples was, what have I done? How can I live with this burden? Look my wife in the eye. I tried to act as if nothing had happened around Emily. I smiled, asked about her day, made plans for the weekend. But inside, I was writhing in a slimy, sickly self-loathing. It seemed like I had a brand on my forehead. Traitor. And everyone around could see it, knew my dirty secret. And Olivia, Lord, I couldn't find a moment's peace. I thought about her constantly. I replayed every second of our intimacy in my mind. I feverishly craved more, even if just for a moment, to embrace her, to breathe in the scent of her hair. And then again and again I cursed myself. No, I can't. It's low. It's vile. But how can you reject what has already seeped into your blood? I pined for Olivia with masochistic rapture. I sat in my car in front of her house for hours, unable to go inside. I listened to her voice on the answering machine for hours, almost crying from that aching tenderness. And I didn't even notice how I was sinking deeper and deeper into this obsession. The climax came in a conversation with Emily. One evening, she caught me in the kitchen, sullen, lost in gloomy thoughts. She hesitated in the doorway, sighed, and asked point blank, "Brian, what's going on with you? You haven't been yourself lately. Will you tell me about it?" It was like a dam burst inside me. The words poured out in a rushed, stuttering stream. About our fight, about talking to Olivia, about the pangs of guilt, about how everything got tangled up, how I no longer knew what I wanted. Emily listened in silence, clenching her teeth and hugging herself tightly, pain and incomprehension in her eyes. And when I ran out of steam, she came up close. She placed her palms on my chest, looked me in the face, seriously, demandingly. "Just answer me honestly, Brian. Did you sleep with my mother?" At that moment, I felt like the lowest scum. I couldn't lie to her face. I was afraid to. And what was the point anyway? My guilt and remorse were plain to see. So I just lowered my head and whispered, barely audibly, "Yes, I'm sorry, Em. I don't know how it happened. I'm just worthless." My wife recoiled as if slapped. She pressed her trembling fingers to her mouth, broke into silent sobs, and I wanted to sink through the floor right then and there, to drop dead on the spot, anything to avoid seeing her tears, knowing that I was the cause. "So that's how it is," she said hoarsely, wiping her wet cheeks. "That's what your vows, your love are worth? And with whom? With my mother? Lord, how could you?" I flinched towards her, tried to embrace her, but Emily pushed me away. She lifted her chin, clenched her fists. An angry flame blazed in her reddened eyes. "Get out, Brian, right now. I can't even look at you, let alone... God, what a fool I was. I believed you. I thought we were doing well, and you and Mommy were carrying on behind my back." She broke off with a sob, unable to finish. She covered her face with her hands and rushed headlong out of the kitchen. And I was left standing in the ruins of my own life, crushed, destroyed. An hour ago, a loving husband, a pillar of strength and hope, and now a scoundrel, a traitor, a man who had trampled on the most sacred thing. That night, I left the house. I threw the bare essentials into a bag, left Emily a note of apology. Where I would go didn't even cross my mind. I just got in the car and drove aimlessly through the deserted streets until I was spent. I came to my senses at Olivia's house. I dragged myself up on shaky legs, rang the doorbell. When my mother-in-law opened, I simply collapsed into her embrace. I was shaking like with fever, frantically whispering, "Forgive me. I've ruined everything. Emily knows. Dear God, what's going to happen now?" Olivia silently stroked my hair. She rocked me, cradled me, murmured something soothing. Then she led me to the bedroom, helped me undress. She got under the covers, pressing her whole body against me, and I drifted away. I plunged into a black, viscous abyss without dreams. The next few days passed in a haze. Olivia and I hardly spoke. We just sat side by side in the kitchen, drinking coffee, smoking. Sometimes we cried aloud, sometimes silently, in an embrace. What to do next? I had no idea. There was a ringing emptiness in my head, a gnawing pain in my chest. It seemed there was no forgiveness for me. Not now, not ever. I had gone too far, ruined everything to hell. But one morning when I went out on the balcony for some air, it was like I was struck by lightning. I suddenly realized clearly, enough. I couldn't keep wallowing in self-pity any longer. I had to do something to figure out how to live with this somehow. I came back into the room, took Olivia's hand. I kissed each finger, pressed my forehead to her cool skin. I exhaled hoarsely, brokenly. "Olive, forgive me. For everything, forgive me. I should have restrained myself. I should have pushed you away. But I couldn't. God knows, I couldn't." She raised her tired, reddened eyes to me. She stroked my cheek, smiled sadly. "Don't blame yourself, Brian. We're both at fault here. We thought we could hide it, deceive everyone, but you can't run away from yourself." I gripped her fingers until they cracked. My throat constricted with a spasm. Tears welled up in my eyes. "I don't regret it, Olive. You hear? I don't regret a single second I was with you. Only Emily. God, she'll hate us. And she'll be right, too." Olivia pulled her hand free, turned towards the window. Her back tense, shoulders drooping. Her voice flat, muted. "Maybe it's for the best, Brian. Everything hidden comes to light eventually, no matter how you hide it. Emily's a smart girl. She'll cope. And well, it's time for us to pay the piper." At that moment, I felt a surge of hatred for her for the first time, for that tone, for her coldness and indifference, as if she hadn't seduced her own son-in-law, ruined her daughter's life, as if she didn't care about anyone but herself. I jumped up, pacing the room, bumping into corners. I wanted to yell, to smash things, to stamp my feet, but instead I just furiously stuffed my clothes into my bag. I put my shoes on, getting tangled in the laces. I didn't see or hear anything around me. "Brian, where are you going?" Olivia touched my shoulder, trying to look me in the face. "Wait, let's talk." I shrugged off her hand. With a jerk, I zipped up the bag, slung it over my shoulder. I said without turning around, "It's too late to talk. You're right, it's time to pay the piper. So that's what I'm going to do. Deal with the mess I've made myself." The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang, as if putting a period, a fat and irrevocable one, cutting off everything that came before. Olivia, Emily, my former self, foolish, weak, indulging my desires. All that remained was to understand who was I now, and how to live on with the burden of my mistakes. Well, I've reached the end of my story. I've confessed, poured out everything that had piled up on my soul. To be honest, just doing that has brought some relief. It's like I've lanced a festering wound, let the poison out. I know you have every right to judge me, to consider me the lowest scum, an ungrateful pig, and I won't lie. That's exactly how I see myself too. It's hard to justify a person who betrayed his closest loved ones, who spat in the face of those who loved and believed in him. But no matter how you look at it, there's no going back. What's done is done, you can't undo it. Now my cross to bear is to live with this burden, to answer for every action, every misstep. Emily and I got divorced, quietly, peacefully, with no fuss. She didn't even file for alimony, though I asked her to. She said, "I don't need anything from you. Live however you want, just don't forget the kids. They're not to blame for their father being a bastard." As for Olivia, I haven't seen her since either. And honestly, I don't feel the need. I burned up over those months. No love remains, not even passion, only emptiness and a bitter taste on my lips. I heard recently that she moved away somewhere, either to be with relatives or just to get away from our town. Well, good riddance to her. Maybe at least in her new place she won't go around breaking up other people's families. As for me, well, what about me? I'm scraping by bit by bit, working, raising the kids, trying not to lose my mind. I quit drinking, started going to church. Not that I've become a deep believer, but it's at least some support. Sometimes it hits me, of course, especially at night in the cold bed, the urge to howl out loud, to lose myself, to drop dead. But I hold on. After all, I stirred up this mess myself, so now I'm going to eat it up with a big spoon until I feel sick. Well, that's the story, folks. A cautionary tale. Damn it all to hell. Just the raw, unvarnished truth, without any cuts or embellishments. Thank you to everyone who listened and didn't judge. Your compassion, your support, it means so much to me right now. Who knows, maybe your advice will help me find a way out, or at least to find some meaning, some foothold. And to the rest of you, I want to say this. Cherish what you have. Love the ones who are with you. Don't chase after a phantom happiness. Don't trample your real life into the mud. Value your family. Guard your loyalty. Because betrayal, it's like a cancerous tumor. Once it metastasizes, you'll never get rid of it, never cure it. You'll just rot from the inside, disgusted with yourself until your dying day. Of course, no one is immune from making mistakes. We're all only human. We all have weaknesses. But it's one thing to stumble, and quite another to consciously do something vile. So think about what you're dreaming of, what you're striving for, what you really want. And if you do decide to take a risk, to cross a line, be ready for the consequences. Because the reckoning is always inevitable, and far from always fair and proportionate to the deed. You have to pay for everything in this life, and count yourself lucky if the price turns out not to be too high. You should know how far human passions can go, what fleeting desires can lead to. Well, I guess that's about all I wanted to say. I don't know if I managed to get my point across. I'd like to believe that my story is more than just another tall tale on the internet, that it will make someone stop and think, to step back from the edge of the abyss. As for me, it's time to move on, to somehow live, to find a new purpose, and of course, to raise my kids. After all, I'm still young, full of strength. It would be a shame to wallow in self-pity and sprinkle ashes on my head for the rest of my days. I'll try to become better, wiser, more honest with myself and the world. I'll learn to cherish what I have instead of chasing rainbows in the sky. Who knows, maybe fate will still smile on me, give me a second chance. But if not, so be it. At least my conscience will be clear. Well, that's about it for my story. Pardon me if it was rambling and muddled. I'm no writer, no master at expressing myself eloquently. I just wanted to get it off my chest, to pour my heart out. Perhaps it will provide some relief, some release. Thank you to everyone who was with me, for your sensitivity, your understanding and tact. Believe me, it means so much. It's priceless. And now, farewell. May God grant you to find your own happiness, the real, genuine thing. Cherish it when you find it. And be sensible. Remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, time to go. Hope to see you all in better times. All the best to you, health and strength. And to me, wisdom and luck. Don't speak ill of me. Sincerely yours, Brian. This story is definitely interesting and tragic at the same time. You never know how life will turn out. We have many similar to this and at the same time different interesting stories on our storytelling podcast channel. So subscribe so you don't miss new stories. And also don't forget to like, share with your friends, and comment on what you liked in the stories. See you soon.